President Cyril Ramaphosa has apologized to Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari following the xenophobic violence that flared up in some parts of the country last month. Ramaphosa says both countries have a long-standing history and the time has come to strengthen the bonds. The two countries have signed a number of trade agreements. Our reporter Hitekani Magwedze is at the Union Buildings and joins us live. A very good afternoon to you, Hitekani. Quite a momentous occasion with the two heads of state meeting today. But key and top of the agenda today was the issue of the xenophobic attacks. What was the outcome of the discussions regarding that?
Well, absolutely, Tammy. There were very key discussions around the attacks on foreign nationals and specifically attacks on foreign Nigerian citizens. And of course, that made a huge part of the discussions this morning. We heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa talking about how it's regrettable that that South Africa had this kind of attacks on Nigerian citizens. And in fact, before we go even further, let's just have a quick listen to exactly what he said.
We shall never forget the role that your country played in ensuring that the people of South Africa enjoy the freedom that we enjoy today. Mr. President, I'd like to take this opportunity to reiterate South Africa's and our government's deep regret at the incidents of public violence that erupted in some parts of our country a few weeks ago. Some of the acts of violence were directed at foreign nationals, and some of whom coming from your own country. We would like to assure you that South Africa is committed to the ideals of African unity and solidarity, to respect the human rights of others, and to ensure that South Africa is ruled by the rule of law. While we are working to address the economic and social conditions that have given rise to frustrations and anger among some of our people, we firmly condemn all forms of intolerance and will not hesitate to act against criminal acts and violence.
Now, staying with the story, Ramaphosa thanked Nigeria for the role that they played in providing support to South Africans during the apartheid era.
Your visit is important to us as it signifies the cordial relations which exist and have always existed between our two great nations. I would like to express my appreciation to you for honoring my invitation and attending this inaugural session of the Elevated Binational Commission. Our two countries enjoy historical, political, economic, and social relations. Our meeting today presents us with an opportunity not only to review the general state of our bilateral relations, but to make a firm determination that the ties between our two countries will be further strengthened by your visit here. We meet at a time when our two nations have just emerged from elections. In this context, allow me, Mr. President, to convey our congratulations to you and the people of Nigeria. These elections are testimony to our commitment to deepen democracy and good governance on our continent. From its independence, Nigeria's foreign policy has been anchored on African liberation and African progress. This was the case during the struggle to free African countries from the shackles of colonialism and imperialism. South Africa will always be grateful for the support we received from your country during the very dark days of the apartheid misrule of this country.
We are still in conversation with our reporter, Hitekani Magwedze, who's coming to us live from the Union Buildings, where this momentous occasion took place of the two presidents meeting and discussing various issues of common concern. Now, Hitekani, there are a number of agreements as well that were reached during this time. Won't you talk us through the scope of these agreements?
Well, Tammy, the discussions around xenophobia and the violent attacks against foreign nationals weren't the only crux and major point in terms of the discussions that were taking place. The other thing is the fact that this was the 20th anniversary of the binational committee around the two nations, and that's to encourage bilateral cooperation between South Africa and Nigeria. So this was the 20th year in which this committee was sitting, and this was the first time that it was elevated to a heads of state level. So quite a momentous time for it, and the discussions were, of course, around matters such as the sectors of trade and industry, mining, education, policing, and border security, and many others. And to this effect, about 32 agreements and a memoranda of understanding were signed in order for ministers of both South Africa and Nigeria to implement. And as you can understand, these are multiple sectors that these two countries share an understanding and share some type of interest mutually in order to develop each other. There's business interests as well. We know that they also started or established a joint ministerial council that will look into trade, investment, and industry. And this is to encourage private sector people or orientated individuals in both countries to make use of the opportunities that avail themselves in both South Africa and Nigeria. We did hear from the Nigerian President Buhari saying, or rather pleading, with South Africa to open up avenues for Nigerian businesses to do business in South Africa. He was saying that there's a lot of South African businesses that are already established in Nigeria, and therefore there should be a mutual benefit in terms of the trade opportunities that are available in both countries, Tammy.
There was also an acknowledgement, Hitekani, that South Africa and Nigeria are two powerhouses on the continent. So these conversations were not just limited to South Africa and Nigeria, but also looked at Africa and the African influence within the United Nations. If you could just break that down for us, specifically with regard to the Security Council.
Well, we do know that in the Security Council, Africa doesn't have a permanent seat. And the question was whether the two powerhouses in South Africa and Nigeria are using their influence to ensure that there's proper representation within the UN Security Council. And to that, the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, responded in saying that indeed there's a need for a more representative sitting in the Security Council, saying that that's always been their stance, and they continue to press for that representation in the UN Security Council. But we do know as well that the relations between Nigeria and South Africa in their own self are could either be detrimental or very beneficial to Africa, and that's why both presidents agreed that there's a need to ensure that there's better relations between the two countries to benefit Africa as well. But indeed, he reiterated and emphasized the need for more representation, especially from African nations within the UN Security Council.
Well, thank you so much, Hitekani. That's our report today, Hitekani Magwedze, coming to us live from the Union Buildings, where the two presidents have just briefed the media on their expectations and what they will be doing moving forward. I also found it quite interesting, the fact that it was mentioned that there will be an intelligence sharing relationship between them and policing between the two countries. So how that will unfold is a matter for next meetings. Now, meanwhile, the Nigerian President, Muhammadu Buhari, has expressed gratitude in the way that the two countries have been working together so far, and this despite the recent attacks on foreign nationals.
We in Nigeria value the warm fraternal relations binding our two countries and cherish our superficial relationship. We consider South Africa and LA and a strategic partner. There exist 32 agreements and memorandum of understandings signed between Nigeria and South Africa. Excuse me. And we need to implement those that have come into force, as well as to expedite necessary action to ratify the 7 outstanding agreements that have not yet been brought into force. I welcome the robust defense cooperation between Nigeria and South Africa and call for more support and solidarity with us in our fight against terrorism and violent extremism. We also welcome the increased collaboration against arms and drug trafficking, money laundering, and human trafficking. We are committed to greater cooperation to address the economic challenges facing the people of our two countries, especially with regard to unemployment, which we believe is at the root of so much youth restiveness and radicalization.